Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Kirkpatrick podcast. It is Vanessa, and I've got one thing to say to you today. If impact lives in one department, it dies in isolation. She said it. I hate to tell you, evaluation and creating impact in an organization cannot be done alone. So when we think about who owns evaluation in learning and development, we've got to get out of the mindset that we as L&D or that L&D is the only department that owns this process or has ownership in the process. Now, L&D should own the entire process, like overall, right? They should be responsible for tracking the metrics and like setting them up when they're setting up their programs and their initiatives. And they need to be able to have the relationships to tap in the other areas of the business that need to participate. You know, this isn't about one department owning evaluation. It's about building an organization where everyone has skin in the game. And when everyone has skin in the game, it's a lot easier to gather that sort of buy-in. Number one question, when we start to talk about in KP, like level 3 and getting managers to support and be part of the training process. And they're like, well, we don't own managers. How are we going to tell them that they have to support us? Who are we? We can't tell them what to do with their time. They're already overloaded. You L&D folks are 100% correct. You do not have the authority in order to do that. And you can influence. You can have conversations with the right authorities, right? To help to embed this as part of the culture. And you have to champion this work. All too often, we look at evaluation in this like vacuum and like this silo, and impact measurement gets solely left to learning and development. And often we look at it after the program's been done. But the problem when you do this is that there becomes no shared responsibility for gathering data. So when L&D tries to go to the operations department or the product team or the sales team or the IT team to gather data that they need to measure impact, it becomes a situation where they're like, whoa, what do you want to do with my data? It's my data, not yours. Although let's all be honest, if it's not private to a human, an employee, it is company data. You do not own it. The company owns it. So we're just going to leave that one there. But the problem when you work in a silo is just that. Everyone feels like, not my problem if you do or do not get the data that you need. And when you leave it solely to learning and development, your KPIs completely become disconnected. You know, in L&D, we're not business folks. Some of us have that understanding, right? And I'd like to think that I have a lot to learn in the business game, like a lot. And I've got mentors to support me, but I'd like to think that I naturally came with a little bit more of that entrepreneurial business mindset, which is why we're here. However, I also know that a lot of folks don't come with that, and that's okay. But then we as a business need to help bring them along and provide them with the resources that they need in order to connect operational KPIs and business outcomes. And then as leaders, we see the results as, well, that's just L&D's job. If they're instituting the training, it's up to them to be the sole reason that that KPI gets met, instead of it being a shared achievement. And when that happens, you get missed insights, weak results, and under-leveraged data. A lot of the work that we have to do in learning and in business is change our mindset. See, we think we have to buy more tools. Now, mind you, I do have tools if you want to buy some stuff. We're getting in the technology game. We're very excited about that. And it is actually the hardest thing that we have to do is shift our mindset. Businesses are changing. We are changing at the speed of light. This is the beginning of the internet, where we are right now. We are in those AOL days. We're in the days that we're going to literally in like 10, 15 years talk about the days when you had to wait your turn to get on ChatGPT. Like that's the era that we're in. And so we've got to do our work on shifting our mindset and realizing that impact is an organization-wide priority and not the function of just one team. We as an organization, we are the team. So, okay, maybe it is one team, the organization. It's not one department. And when you have shared accountability, every leader and manager, they understand their role in measuring and influencing performance. And I want to hold on that for a second. The fact is, a lot of great training and initiatives, it goes to die when someone goes back on the back into the work environment, the performance environment, because there is no accountability, there's no reward, there's no encouragement, there's no reinforcement to do the thing that you just learned how to do. Now, I know how to do my job the way that I've always done it. It's second nature. I have enough insight and evidence that it has worked for me in the past. So I'm not really that invested in actually changing my behavior. Why should I? And this is why we need managers and leaders to influence performance. Because what we're asking our people to do is go against their brain and what their brain wants to do and what it wants to do is to keep them safe and keep them in their comfort zone. And we're asking them to do something different. And until evaluation and impact is looked at as shared accountability, that is when managers get bought in. And I hate that it feels like, L&D, you have to hold this responsibility of being the only one that brings managers along and tries to influence them. That is a losing battle. Do you have responsibility in that? Yes. Should you be doing some of that influencing and championing? Yes, absolutely. But you can't do it alone. And data, the good data that you need in order to measure impact, it doesn't come from post-training surveys. It comes from around the organization. So we've got to stop thinking that post-training surveys is going to give us enough insight to know whether or not impact was had. Because it won't. And evaluation is what informs decisions at every level of the organization. And the 4 levels, it thrives when level 3 and level 4 are actually co-owned as opposed to owned just by L&D. When organizations, like folks will ask, Vanessa, when do you see it right? When levels 3 and 4 are co-owned. Levels 1 and 2, you can leave that to the training department, right? You can leave that to learning. They'll do right, hopefully, by what they need to do in that training or, in that learning experience. But back on the job, that is when it is important for L&D to help support and drive managers and help and support the learners, but they can't be the only ones. So it's funny. I've been doing a lot of reflecting on like how things in my life and world have like ended up and where there are like correlations and where I felt like the world or the universe has taken something from me. And I realized now that it's like for the better and for a reason. But one of the things I did for my sorority after I graduated was I was overseeing our alumni groups. So we would have alumni chapters similar to like, ATD chapters where we would have like local meetups, local events. We were, we had like, the sorority was obviously like the higher organization, like ATD Central or ATD HQ. And then we had our own chapter events and things like that. If you are part of ATD, like if you think of a NAC, your National Advisor, I think it's called, coordinator or something like that, like that was my role at one point, right? Was a regional alumni specialist. And so I oversaw in my region or alumni groups in New Jersey and New York. I had some in Connecticut, Pennsylvania. And here's the challenge that I had. From the alumni side, we had zero actual ability to hold people accountable. Like the worst thing that we could do to like hold someone accountable, like they'd have to do something really, really bad for us to expel them, like really bad. But otherwise, like we could take away their credentials, but like there are certain things that we know are in their best interest and that we would recommend to them. But if like they didn't want to change how they were doing things, there really wasn't anything that we could do. Not like on the collegiate side where there were actual like fines and sanctions and all of that. It's actually one of these things that like when an alumni volunteer and a collegiate volunteer like talk to each other, it's like, or when you go from the collegiate side to the alumni side, they're like, whoa, how do you get anything done? It's like, right, we've got to work on the power of influence. And so I say all this to say, it's like funny how I was doing that for so long before I came here. Like, I mean, I went all the way up to like the council level where I sat on our international executive board in this role. And obviously my level of authority changed at that point. But like, when I think about what we have to do today and like the lessons I take in to advise my customers and my clients on how do I influence, I actually pull a lot too from my experience as a regional alumni specialist, where it's like, I am trying to like get them to do what I need them to do because I know it's in their best interest and it's only going to help them. And here are some of the strategies that I used. So I just think it's so funny how like the world, comes together in these ways and like points you in the direction of which you're supposed to be. And I just feel like it was, who knew back then that I was going to end up in this space, having this conversation, having a platform to have this sort of conversation, and like all of that work like helped to lead to this. So anyway, but like, trust me, I've had to try to influence people. And obviously I've done this in the organizational space as well, but it is not easy to not have authority over someone, but try to have that sort. It's almost like, what's funny is like, I feel like I almost had like this like guise of like, I do have authority, right? Like, well, I'm the regional alumni specialist, you know what I mean? But like, in all actuality, if they didn't do what I recommended, there was literally nothing that was going to happen. But you kind of had to like play the game a little bit. It's kind of what we got to do too in L&D. So here are 4 ways that I want you to take away from today to actually model as an executive this culture, because it has to start from you. If you want a culture of continuous improvement, you want a culture of innovation, you want a culture of high performance, you've got to have a culture of evaluation. Full stop. So first, you need to be the one that integrates impact measurements into strategic plans. Stop giving plans without having any sort of measurement or metric. Make sure that these things align with enterprise KPIs. Start asking the right questions in meetings. The right question is, what evidence do we have that this is working? And do not settle for an NPS score or completion rates or a knowledge check assessment. That's not telling you. That's telling you that they like the experience because maybe they like the facilitator. That's telling you that they were able to cram right before they took the test. It's not telling you that it's actually working. Ask the right questions and dig. Make sure that you're publicly celebrating wins tied to results. Evaluation is not just about uncovering what's wrong. And I think that's where it gets a bad brand. Evaluation is about uncovering what is working and recognizing the teams and the people that are contributing to measurable impact. I get FOMO, and I am more apt to want to contribute in a more meaningful way if I see an opportunity to have recognition. I mean, kind of not really, but yes. Publicly celebrate wins tied to results. I can tell you I'm also the worst at this. It's just like how we are, I think, made as like people and humans, that we focus so much on like the negative, the areas of opportunity or improvement as opposed to the wins. And you've got to balance that. The next thing that you as an executive have to do is hold your managers accountable. And that includes yourself. You lead an executive team. How are you holding them and influencing them to perform at the peak performance that you need? Evaluation has to flow into performance reviews. If your managers are not supporting their employees learning on the job, that has to be addressed. Ever hear the phrase like people don't leave like organizations, they leave bad managers, something like that? It's more true than it is not true. So we've got to start holding managers accountable, and we have to hold ourselves accountable and say, was that manager the right person to put in that role? Or were they just like were they really good at that job? Like the super user of that job. And then you got to ask them, do you even want to manage people? And if they do, then you got to ask, are we providing them with the support and resources in order to be a good people manager? Because I also think that there are a lot of people that maybe were really good at their job and they just don't have the natural skill set to automatically become a good people manager. Or they don't have the skill set, or they don't know where to go to get those skills on their own. It's part of the reason why I like volunteering. I got a lot of management skills when I was not actually a manager, like before I became a manager of people. And let me tell you, I say it all the time, managing volunteers is a whole heck of a lot harder than managing employees, because you have to deal with not actual influence, no actual real authority. And it teaches you a lot about the right way to lead. I think it actually influences a lot how I lead in my organization, because I had that experience first and foremost. So as much as I don't want to do this, I'm going to say it here, which is now holding me accountable, because I'm sure people will ask. That sounds pretty full of myself. I'm sure someone will at some point ask. I am planning on joining the PTA for my girls' school. I've tried to avoid it. I've had blinders on whenever they've asked. Again, the problem is I know too much. I know how volunteer organizations should be run. And when I join something, I don't just join. I end up volunteering. I end up becoming president. I end up changing how things are done. And I wanted to not do that and save myself a little bit of time. But my daughters really want me involved and I want to integrate more in the community. So I'm going to try not to insert myself as I know that I usually do and try to like go with the flow a little bit. But I think we've got to start looking at holding managers accountable and influencing. And then you want to make sure that your teams have the resources that they need. 2 big reasons why people do not do what they're supposed to do on the job. No support, whether it's manager, peer, the culture and the environment isn't supportive. Or second, they don't have the resources in order to perform those behaviors. If we want to model the culture, we've got to provide the resources. They need the tools and the time to track and act on data. So from this episode, I want you to start with asking, what's the evidence in every project update? Start small, start there. For our L&D leaders, I want you to invite other departments to co-own success measures from day one. You've got to start building relationships. We got to get our heads up out of articulate storyline, whatever tool you might use. And we've got to build relationships because that's also when you're going to see people will want to co-own success with you because they feel that relationship with you. And if you want to learn exactly how to do this and you want to work on creating these solutions, join us at the Kirkpatrick Summit this September 9th to 11th in Dulles, Virginia. I hope to see you there. This is going to be a full 2.5 days of workshopping and like high energy impact incubator. I've got the best facilitator for it. And you'll get to see sneak peeks of the book. You'll get to see the new technology that we've been working on. You'll get to meet with our partners, but most importantly, you'll get to collaborate with each other, learn from each other, and really take lessons from other successes. So with that, friends, I'll catch y'all on the next episode and hopefully in Dulles, Virginia. Bye.